go from there. So I'm gonna start working. I've got a mixture here of, it's a little bit of red and a little bit of the, I think it's just white, might be. And this is my focal point, but I think it's time to just kind of fill it in a little bit. I worked on this yesterday, so it's still pretty wet. And you'll notice that sometimes I switch hands when I paint, and I hold my brush a little bit differently than some people expect, very differently than a watercolorist. I use these blue shop towels because they have a lot less lint. So over here, this is a mix of magenta and white. And the mixes that I have in here are all from those colors that I have on there. I try not to gray my colors down until the very end. It's very easy to gray colors down, but it's almost impossible to brighten them back up, so I always start out super bright. Like over the top. I've been accused of being garish. That seems to be a word that's like in vogue lately. And I don't believe that you can be garish.
You're not.
As long as you're authentic, you're not garish. So, and I try to focus on just the big shapes. Roses are primarily made up of straight line. You know, it's a little bit hard to tell when you first see them because they're so round and voluptuous, right? But if you look at their petals and you approach them from a straight line point of view, sorry, I got lost. That's still where I'm at. You can get that real rose sort of feeling. My roses are being lit by very cool light, which means that deep down inside those petals is this luscious red, hot warmth that I want to, I don't want to forget it, I want to convey it. Light source is coming from the top to the left, so I'm going to all the shadows. Even though I'm still making the shadows super bright, I'm going to leave them concave and basically around here. Can everybody see that? So they're like all this way, making a shape like that. And if you look at the roses as just little balls at first, that really helps you keep it loose and not get lost with each petal. The shadow color that I'm making is a mixture of magenta and a little bit of the violet that I pre-mixed, which is the phthalo. I add the medium generously, again, because it helps isolate the color, it makes it more juicy, it prolongs it, it makes it more transparent.
Along the same line?
It's along the same line, except unlike liquid, it doesn't get dark. You ever seen liquid in a bottle? It doesn't stink, it doesn't have any solvents in it. Your kids could smear it all over their faces and they would probably be fine.
What's it called?
It's solvent-free gel. It's by Gamblin. It's fairly new, but they recommend that you don't mix any more than 30% into your color, but I mix a lot more, just because it's juicy.
Is it archival safe?
Yes, it is. It's absolutely archival. Gamblin works really hard to make their colors archival. I get really messy when I paint, but I had a friend from the Painted Ladies that taught me this. We call it the uber secret paper towel folding trick. So I'm not very good at it, especially when I get in the zone. But you just, when you wipe, you fold it back on it to itself and it keeps your hands clean, at least supposedly. See these blue little thingies that I've got going on here? And the reason why I have those is because when I decided to do this painting, I knew I was going to be talking about color. And I wanted to do a visual complementary color scheme. Unlike mixing complements, visual complements they're a little bit different. They're on the light spectrum instead of mixing complements that make gray. And when you have, so I wanted magenta, and if you stare at bright magenta for a long time and then stare at a white piece of paper, you will see kind of this turquoise-ish, bluish after image. Because our eyes provide us with these after image, if an artist doesn't provide a place for your eyes to rest, paintings, you look at it a long time, it becomes less vibrant. And I'm all about the vibrancy. I love color, I love brightness and the life that it gives. So I always provide the viewer somewhere for their eyes to rest and to bounce off of most of the time. I try not to say always, because what I always end up doing is things a little differently with each painting. Each painting kind of gets its own life. And this is why I sneak up on them, because, you know, they tell me something different, each one does. And I try to not be a control freak and let them take a life of their own. They want to live, they want to have something to say. And I tend to think that that's our deep psyche that's trying to come out. You know, obviously I don't hear voices, but I sort of do. And as I'm putting in the roses, I'm going to also add this background, violet. I left the canvas white-ish, specifically because oils do tend to become more transparent over time. I don't know if you saw that, I just got a little bit of white into my violet, and so I just wipe it right away. I don't want to contaminate my colors too soon. And we probably don't have enough time for you to see me allow my colors to contaminate. Again, I'm very, in the beginning, and this is the beginning, I really want to keep everything very, very clean. So right when the edge comes up to the rose, I'm adding a little bit of magenta, and the reason for that is I want it to feel really lit, like it's glowing. So as the atmosphere comes close to my subject, I want to warm it up. So in areas, I did it with blue here because this blue is a little bit lighter and warmer than this violet. But if I do it to the edges here, you can also do it with red. You can see here in the foliage, I did it with red. You start getting that movement and that feeling that, wow, this is really lit. It's so lit that it's making everything glow around it. I don't generally use a lot of Gamsol or terps, I guess, in the top painting, but I really want to keep my shadows very, very thin and very, very transparent. I don't want to introduce opacity into the shadows because that will make them advance. So over here, this is this is my focal point. This is kind of a secondary. Well, I'm going to keep these really loose and the edges super soft. I want your eye to be able to move back and forth from these. I like the tension of having it on the left-hand side. This one's in the center, and I don't always put my focal point in the center. In fact, most of the time I don't. But in this particular case, I liked, see how this is kind of making this super interesting shape, and then this is like, ta-da! You know, don't forget me. So I really like what the roses are saying. Yeah, yeah. So you can see my color got a little bit muddy here. And it's okay to wipe and scrape. I mean, that's kind of the nice thing about oil-colors. I always told my students, you know, it's not like it's carved in stone. Paint over it or scrape it off. Okay, see how it's kind of like just like this little orb.
Yeah.
And I want to keep the shadows super soft. Your eye is always drawn to hard edges. And so I don't want you to look at the shadows. Shadows aren't interesting. The light is interesting. So this is how I start out with the roses and what I think I actually also like to paint across the form. And I often get asked, how do you get those super soft little edges? And I'm like, it's just from correcting mistakes. So it's because I'm always pushing and pulling against it to try to fix it. And you'll see that with my portraits too, is that the edges tend to be very soft, and that's because I'm kind of sneaking up on it, trying to get it right. So I'm going to try to continue to move around in the painting. I don't want to get stuck in one area because that's just not how I paint. It helps keep my eyes fresh too. I'm a real advocate of using a limited palette, partially because it simplifies life. I do quite a bit of plein air and lugging all those colors around. But this isn't my only palette I've used. Zorn palette, I've used. Sometimes I make up my own. I've used one time, magenta, phthalo green, and yellow. And I did a really fabulous, if I could say so myself, palette knife portrait with an old guy, and he had this scraggly beard, dripping in pastel. It was just so fun. And it was interesting because the green, the phthalo green, and the magenta made this kind of quiet blue-violet. So that was interesting.
Talia?
Yeah.
Are you using Terps to clean your brush?
Gamsol.
Oh, Gamsol to
Yeah.
clean your brush. Oh, okay.
And I don't always clean my brush. In fact, I try to avoid it, but if I'm switching between darks and light, I don't want my white to contaminate my background. That background needs to stay in the back. And by adding white to it, it's going to move forward. I'm also constantly alternating in the pinks between warms and cools. You don't want to, you know how they always say, warm light, cool shadow? Well, my opinion is that it's not really that simple, and that warm light actually creates warm shadows, but cool halftones, cool lesser light. So if it's cool light, I'll do cool, warm, cool, warm. And if it's warm light, I'll do warm, cool, warm, hot. I never want my shadows to be cold. Because in shadow, you know how we were all taught that, warm colors advance and cool colors recede, right? That's correct in light, but in shadow, it's the cool colors that advance and the warm colors that retreat, which is why whenever I've got foliage, I don't paint it dark green. I add red. See in this area, that was white, that was no good. Maybe I'll have to switch brushes. It can take it. It's not going to advance. Where did I put that white? It's not going to advance. It's going to actually recede, especially next to those greens. I want to keep it super cool. So does that make sense? And the reason why why in this case I used violet. Often I use like a dark brown, transparent oxide type of color. But in this case, I wanted the blues to stay vibrant, my little faux, whatever they are. So I decided to go with purple, or violet, which will blend nicer with them. And then as I cut into the light, it's going to start contaminating my color, which is, to the most part, okay. It's a good way to soften your light. Something I like to do is, I'll show you a super duper trick, is I'll take this and I'll pull it out. And again, it keeps movement, and as you pull it out, you get those these super nice edges. This area right here is going to be quite a bit looser. I'm eventually actually going to start bringing a little bit, there's a little bit of green reflecting into the petals. So that's one thing that I need a lot of medium into, because I don't want it to muddy it up, but I still want some of the green in there. Just light. My paintings tend to sometimes look like I'm just super canvas attack, but I'm actually a very slow painter. I got a linen, it's linen, but there was too much of the texture shown through, so I use a roller to put another layer of gesso. But in this particular case, I think it got too prickly, because I'm trying to get the color in there. And once in a while, that looks nice. I love the way color looks when you put a brush stroke down and it starts skipping, over the canvas texture. It's just like that real fun. Looks like you just had a stroke of genius,
Sparkle on water.
Yeah, exactly. She just said sparkle on water. That's one that, again, you can just make that, have your brush skip across it. I've had people tell me sometimes that I missed a spot, and sometimes that's on purpose. If I want really thick and pastel and light, and I don't know if you can see the motion, I kind of shovel my paints. So I don't just go like that, I scoop it up. Which is really bad for my brushes. But it makes fabulous types of effects. So if I go, see how light that looks, that super impasto, it's actually not much lighter than these corners over here. But because it's super thick, I didn't mean to do that last brush. And this is where my soft edges come in. Because I'm just going to go and take it out, which creates a nice soft edge. And this, still in the light. There's a little bit more light over there too. I think I brought a couple of palette knife paintings with me. Sometimes I like to paint just with a palette knife. And the advantage of that is it keeps me super loose. I don't want to do too much. I just want to do the petals as they catch the light. And again, keeping it straight lines. They're like little V's. So as much as I encourage rebellion, I also encourage you, well, just, give it a try. See if it works. If it doesn't, great, fine. But you know, somebody tells you, you're like, what? Just try it. Because it might work well. So as I'm adding a little bit of white here, I'm noticing that the foliage here needs a little bit of it too. As the painting progresses and starts to get wet, it starts becoming more difficult to lay color down, especially with these nice sharp brushes. So a technique that works really well is to make your brush parallel. And then all of a sudden that paint comes off. Plus it looks super cool, you know, because you look like the big thing.
Talia?
Yeah.
I hate to ask you to repeat something, but you were talking about warm light and then what you do with the shadows. Can you repeat
Yeah,
that again?
that is, wow. So I learned that from David LaFell.
Oh,
And
okay.
he's, I read that, I was like, what? You know, so we learned that in light, warm colors advance. They seem, you know, they pop out. And the cool colors just kind of switch back, right? As long as they're of equal saturation. But in the shadows, it is just the opposite. So when you go into a shadow, I'll show you. And I want to put a cool color right here, even if it's transparent. Make sure I don't have any white on here. I'll add just a little bit of white so you can see the color. Even if it's transparent, it will suddenly advance as compared to
Oh, yeah.
the warmer color next to it that recedes and makes it look like you can reach in and grab it. You don't want shadows to stop you. You want to feel like, oh, there's something back there. I could reach my hand back there. You know, shadows are meant to add depth. So when you come and look at this closer, you'll see that even though both of these colors are transparent, both of them are dark, but one is warm and the other is cool, and it's the warm one that recedes and the cool one that jumps out. Green. So this is a super dark green I'm putting next to it. See, even that is jumping off more than the warm color. So that's why I always make my deepest shadows warm in comparison to the other colors, even if my light source is warm. So yeah, I'm a real rebel. But I found that it really gives a lot of depth to the paintings. And I don't generally use black unless I'm doing a portrait, at which point I use black as a mixing color. I never use it for a background because it jumps, it just stops you dead and your eye just like, don't pass, don't go any further. And you want, you know, you really want that, the feeling that you can just reach, especially with people, you know, portraiture, you don't want that black background because you want to reach around it. And if you look at the old master paintings, you'll see that the background that they're using, it's dark, it's hot, and it's transparent. And, you know, but it goes against, you know, because you're painting a portrait, generally a face is kind of an orangish sort of color, and you think, well, I'll need a cool color in the background to complement it. Make sure it's warm. You know, even if you're using a green, add a little bit of orange to it, transparent orange, add a little bit of brown to it, something to make sure that it's not like, boop, in your face. I'm glad because a little bit goes against what some of the people who are in the know. Oh, that was just really gross. Well, it's contaminated. I don't want my roses contaminated. So when that happens, I'll just take it all out move it to it's what I call my mud pile, and then makes a new clean color. I'm using the red and the white. Is that what you were asking? What am I using?
Yeah. No, I don't.
The navel naphtha. It'll probably take me 4 years to learn that. And I leave the little streaks in there. Oh my goodness, don't get me going with the knife. Oh, look how yummy that is if you leave the streaks. And that's the baseline color. So much better. Caroline Anderson. And she was the one that basically gave me permission to sneak up on my paintings, where the others are all, they nail it right there. And so she really opened up my door that it's okay to scribble. It's okay to not quite know where the painting's going to take you. And it's okay to nail it right from the very beginning, too. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you draw or just sketch out blocks where you're going to go, or do you draw each rows?
What I did is I made little squares. No, not circles, squares. I try in my initial drawings to keep straight lines, everything straight, because curves and circles can get a little bit confusing. They're also not as, unless, I say that and I've got the painting back there that's all circles, even the background is all swooshy. But that's what I was feeling at the time. Most of the time, I'm feeling like straight lines. I also have, I recorded the video of my start of this, and I'll probably continue to record and do, just so you can see what I'm doing. And so I went from I actually drew the grid with my paintbrush, so it's not like, please don't measure it. I'm sure you'd have a heart failure. Because I can't draw a straight line. When people say, oh, I couldn't be an artist, I can't draw a straight line. Like, yeah, me either.
That's what I use my board.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even use a ruler. I don't know, I'm just not very precise. So if you want to see that, be sure to either subscribe to my Patreon page or my YouTube channel. And then, like I said, I accept tips.
And you say you have some flyers about your upcoming workshop?
Yes. And it is an intensive workshop. One of the things that I've noticed in a lot of portrait workshops is they always show you how to start, but you never get to finish the portrait, right? So this is for painters who want to get it right and really dig into the portrait and want to come home with it finished. And once I see the model, it's a lot easier for me to get a feeling of who they are. I don't know what it is. I mean, like, Pino said that he doesn't, when his models came in, he wanted them to just shut up and look pretty. And he didn't want to get to know them because he felt that interfered with his portrait. I'm, again, backwards. The more I know the person, the better the portrait's going to be. And I get to know them while I'm painting them. It's a very, almost spiritual. We're all going to be painting the same portrait. So I've got the reference material. I'm going to teach you how to take good photographs, how to make sure you know that it's a good photograph, about copyright and model, and I mean the whole thing, the whole shebang. You will go out of there knowing how to paint a commissioned portrait.
Is that a watercolor or acrylic back there, the girl?
Oh, no, that's oil.
You're kidding?
No.
Wonderful.
Are you talking about the drips?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's from the Gamsol. I love drips. They hardly ever stay, but I was like, okay, don't touch the drips. Because I felt like so accomplished that I got drips. And again, that's I really try to do less is more. I think you can see in the painting of the market over there, I want one area to be the focus and nothing else matters, because when you're looking at that woman who's kind of off in La La Land while she's shopping, you're not going to notice the hands on the other shoppers or even the vegetables. So I have an area of focus, and from there, nothing else matters. So take a look at that one. That's one of my favorite paintings. That's from Israel, from the market. I love the shuk in Israel. You've got people shouting and arguing and bargaining, and that's the kind of environment. Yeah, I love it, but that's how I grew up. To me, that's home.